Come with me while I show you around our Mercedes Sprinter long wheelbase, mostly converted into a camper van. We have 4 seats. The front seats do swivel. These seats slide and lie flat when needed, including when we need to put the bunks down. We have storage between the seats. Got a little wooden cover there which allows us to walk through from the front into the back and store loads of stuff underneath as well. Storage space built in underneath. A little bit of additional storage. We've got a space here where we tend to just dump the big chunky bags, climbing bags and things like that, and dog's bed when it's not in use. After the seats we have the kitchen unit, a worktop that's it's about 2.5 meters long, nearly 3 meters long, and this has been very carefully designed to suit the space in the van. So we had a flat back to the panel that was easy to fit up against the side panels, but then you can see the front has actually got this shaped cut out here with fresh edging put onto it, and the reason for that is that in this portion where it's slightly narrower we needed plenty of depth to put the sink and cooker unit into, but we also needed space for the double bed to pull out. So this pulls out and it actually comes right up to here. So we've got storage base unit at a width, a depth to suit where the bed is, and then up this end where it kicks out a bit, this section, which is now clear of where that bunk is built this wide to suit the fridge, which I've had for many years, and I'd strongly recommend them if you can even still get them. So this fridge, it's a Dometic, and it's a 3-way. It handles a 240 volt feed, a 12 volt feed, and it'll also run on gas. And that was a thing I wanted to keep using because it does such a good job. So that needed this width, hence the kick out piece here and the shaping, and I needed this piece to be narrow to suit the bunk. So that's all in there. Now that fridge, you might have noticed, is a top opening fridge, which doesn't really work very well when you've got a piece of wood above it, so it doesn't open very far. It was sort of far enough if all you want to do is grab something small quickly, but we've got at the moment, and this might be improved later to something a bit more technologically advanced, they've got a tent peg which goes into a hole in there and goes into this piece here, and this piece here, just get it sliding, is actually a drawer. Fridge isn't fully attached in at the moment, as you'll see. But I lift the fridge out of the way, you can see that we've got this basically drawer piece. It's on high strength drawer runners, and that just simply slides in and out with the fridge on top. And what normally happens is the fridge just sits down into some little recessed holes to take the feet, and that's that in place. It locks itself back when we've got the peg in there, so if we brake firmly it doesn't come flying out of the hole. So very simple drawer runner with just enough clearance to miss the carpet, and that actually works really well. We've got a double cooker and sink in place, mounted into the top. We've got the units set so that we can bring out the double pull-out bed, so comes out and sits up right up close to the kitchen unit. So we get a double bunk here, and we get lots of storage in the unit this side. We've got a proper gas locker there to take the gas bottle, and all of that drains out through the bottom of the floor as necessary. Gas drainage in case of leaks, and water drainage to drain off from the sink. We've got plenty of storage underneath the worktop here, and a couple of little cubby spaces here for little odds and ends to drop into, and then we've got all of these spaces for these boxes. And these boxes, just simple collapsible storage boxes, and at the moment I've found they don't actually need anything to hold them in other than this anti-slip matting. These things don't slide around. There's also, tucked right in the back, which you can't see, a fuel tank, a little plastic fuel tank, which will be for the diesel heater for when I fit that. And that diesel heater will likely fit into this space that I'm just using for storage at the moment. And when I fit a water tank as well, which this currently doesn't have, that will also go in here. Lots of storage underneath the bunk here as well. Further storage in these nets on the side. More storage in this unit and its counterpart there, and they double as the support for the lower bunk. When the lower bunk comes down and sits on top of here, and the upper bunk comes down and sits on these legs on top of the lower bunk. This is actually a double bunk, which is also a seat, so plenty of space here. There's easily room for 3, if not 4, on this for during the day use, and then obviously we've got further seating up the front if we wanted it. Really simple, and I'm doing it from sort of outside so you can see the amount of effort required to put this bunk out. You watching? You ready? There we go, done. That's ready to use as a double, with the one minor addition of underneath here I have 2 legs. If you can see, I just deployed one there, there's one up that way as well. Putting it away, again, dead simple. You just lift the cushion up so you can see what's going on here. We've got a hinge point here and a hinge point here. We've got the little finger holes to lift that part, and then it slides in. And done. To deploy these 2 single bunks, which as you can see are well out of the way for during the daytime, first step is dropping the 2 seats. So that gives me, as you can see, just about exact clearance for when this bunk comes down and sits onto the top of that unit and the top of that unit. Whip out the 2 legs, and these are for the upper bunk when that gets deployed in a moment. So the first step, once the seats are down and out of the way, and that will just squash slightly as I go, is these bunks are held in place with bolts. Both ends, they've got a bolt each. I've got a captive T-nut in there and a bolt here, which is just finger tight with a bit of a screech. That's that, and they tend to live in those little cup holders. So that's those out, and then this lower bunk just simply lays down and sits onto the top of the 2 units. Simple as that. And this is absolutely solid. The second bunk comes down in just the same way. So we'll whip the bolts out of here. And then this one comes down and it will stop about there. And this is where we need the legs. So very simply, we've got a notch at the top which sits in there, and a notch at the bottom which goes down to the lower bunk. So that's that end sturdy and fixed in place. Then we just do the same at the other end. Goes into its slot there and sits down into place. That's it. And that one is also supported by the units now with the legs up. So all of the load is straight down through. So that is also absolutely rock solid. To hold it against the sides, we've got this double thickness of 9mm ply there and here, and that's all bolted into the frame of the van. So putting it away, just as quick and easy. We lift the top bunk up, and it actually wedges and holds itself up there because this is so tightly measured to fit against the ceiling. Take the two legs out and we put the bolts back in. The legs often just sit in that net. Sometimes I tuck them out of the way behind the seats. They'll get a proper home one day, I'm sure. Then the lower bunk lifts up, tucks in place. Sometimes the mattress cover getting a little bit pinched because the measurements are that tight. Then bolts back in on this one and that'll be done. Now for size, we've got essentially regarded as a narrow single width to these, and it was very carefully measured out so that we've got the height positions of the seats so that they're comfortable to sit on. They, when folded, were measured and allow for the bunk to sit just down touching them but without actually loading them. So we've then got the space from there to the ceiling, and we've got the two bunk widths in there, so that is measured. I really didn't have any spare millimeters to play with on that. We've even, on the hinge points, so if you can see here, we've got hinge points on each bunk, both ends, and these are positioned, the actual point of the pivot, it's not central to the depth of the bunk, it's positioned slightly down towards the lower edge of the bunk and at that distance in, so that we maximize the bunk space and the ability for the bunks to hinge down and sit in place. So all, as I say, measured to the millimeter to get it to work, and that did take a little bit of wriggling and figuring out. Our electrics are still very much a work in progress. They were fitted up for our big trip last summer and they still need to be a little bit revamped and reworked. In here we've got a set of 4 lithium iron phosphate cells, LiFePO 4. So they're in there, a set of 4 cells making up 12 volts. They are charged by this Renogy DC to DC charger. So that takes its feed from the battery, the main van battery under the footwell there. So essentially it's being charged by the alternator. So its main feed comes from there into the unit. there's a separate little fly wire you can see here, this little red one. That takes a signal from a dedicated point under the driver's seat in all the electrics there, which says when the alternator's running. So that only charges when the alternator is running and supplying charge correctly. So that's currently how our batteries are charged. I've also got here an MPPT, a solar charge controller, but that's not connected up at the moment. That's just put in place to make sure it fitted in the space that we're putting all this charge gear in. I don't yet have the solar panels on the roof. This unit is a 1 kilowatt inverter, which is plenty of inverter to run off of a 12 volt system. If you wanted a bigger inverter in there, then you'd need to set it up with maybe a 24 volt system so that you didn't have such huge chunky cables overheating. So we've got 12 volts coming off the batteries, and we've got a 240 volt feed off of the inverter. The inverter I just simply plug in there and it supplies the power into the sockets behind the fridge, and there's a second socket in the cubby in the kitchen unit as well. So that's simply all there is there, and the reason for the mess of cables is we had to do some on the road fixes because the BMS that I've got in there, the battery management system, that failed partway through our trip. It's supposed to control the power going into the batteries and managing that input side, and the power coming out of the batteries and managing that, so that it doesn't get overcharged on the battery side. You know, it's not good for the batteries if they're constantly fed charging power when they don't need it, and we don't want them to get to a point where all the power's drained and it's too low. That's damaging for them as well. So the BMS manages that. Now it manages the one that we've got in there at the moment that needs replacing. It manages the low state position perfectly fine, but unfortunately it failed on the charging side. So there's part of that BMS just broke for the charging. So to get it to charge, we had to take the more manual approach of charging it from the Renogy system, but bypassing the BMS for charging and just keeping an eye on it with the multimeter every now and then to make sure it wasn't getting up to overcharged. We stopped it well short of that. So some of those excess wires are to do with that, and they're just tucked there out of the way. And for the lighting, which we hadn't got going when we headed off on our big trip, this loose wire here actually feeds up here. I've got a switch at the top there which supplies a bunch of LEDs just stuck to the roof, which are actually really bright and do a really good job. And there's a second wire that drops down to a little spotlight there. And I can't show you all these things working because currently the batteries are all disconnected pending me doing the repair work to that part of the system. When I've done that repair work, I'll be adding in some extra 12 volt feed further through into the kitchen end, because I need to supply power for a water pump for when I fit the water tank. But other than that, there's no further need for power in here. We've got two double sockets, we've got 12 volt supply for the lighting, and we've got then just that one extra 12 volt feed for the water pump. And that'll be all the electric sorted. It initially had a bulkhead in here, which most do, and I got the garage to remove that before I picked the van up. So that was all nice and open, and as you've seen with the box set up on the seats there, we've got step through, easy walk through ability. The floor, which you can't see much because I've got the carpet on there, it's the original plywood flooring in there, so no change to that. I haven't insulated underneath it like many do, because me and my camera operator behind there, Isaac, who's taller than me, we push our heads against the ceiling, even with the high roof. All of the sides and roof are insulated, and I've used recycled plastic bottle insulation rather than any of the other sorts, because I can tuck it into places like you can with the fiberglass insulation, but it hasn't got all of that horrible fiberglass element to it. You can see we've got a nice light grey carpet throughout. I went for light because we've only got the one main window in the side at the moment. Hopefully I'll fit a second window at some point, probably here above the sink and everything. But the carpet, it's just a remnant from a local carpet place, and there was so much of it, we've done the whole run through with carpet, including into the cab, and there was actually enough to do the main cabin in the boat as well, and there's still a little piece left over after that. So that was a good buy. That was 20 quid well spent. We don't have an internal space for shower and toilet, but we have plenty of outside space for shower and toilet, and I'll show you how we set that up so that we've got privacy as well. Well, first version of privacy which we've used is for showering. We've got one of these solar showers, and we've literally just hung it up onto the end of the roof rack outside on a quiet lay-by area next to a mountain road, and that's worked perfectly well for a shower, screened by the van from the road effectively. But if we don't have that sort of out of the way position for it, then we've got another system that works out of the back of the doors. So let's open the second door. There we go. Get that one open and fix it open in place. Bring the other door round to its clicked open position. Now, like that, I think there are little shelters that you can get that fit over all of this lot, but that's not what we've done. What I found was a pole from, this was my granddad's handle for his fishing net, and this works really well. He actually made this himself, it's not a shop bought one. So it extends out and has little clickers like many of these things do. And the way this works for us is that we bob the handle up against one side, and we bob the pole extended out to a useful size there, and we just wedge it across. So now if there's a breeze, it can't close the doors on us. That's in place, and we can hang up a nice thin piece of tarp over that, just hang it on there, and we've got a privacy screen created off the back of the van, and that works perfectly well. We've got a little lift out toilet which we can sit on the floor down there. We've got the shower unit which I can hang off of the end of the roof rack here and hang down as well, and that actually works really, really well. While I'm on the subject of these little solar showers, let me grab this off of here. So I've got a few of these. I found them cheap. You can see on the back here that there's a reservoir space in there. There's even a little thermometer thing on it if you need to, but these work really well. But you fill them up with water, you can hang them up in the sun while you're at a campground, and they warm up, and the water ends up nice and warm. And then you just simply hang it up wherever's convenient to hang it, and off the bottom you've got a little shower head tap. You can hose yourself down. So that's what we used last summer. Now since then, and it's back on the boat, what I've got is an alternative to this. It's a little electric pump that sits into a bucket of water that you might have warmed up previously. So it sits into that and it pumps water through a shower head. So you get a little bit better strength of shower. So this is all just gravity fed, that other one's actually pumped, so you can get quite a strong shower blast if you want off that. It does push more water through though. Now this unit, this little bag, takes 15 litres of water. And what we actually found in practice is that one bag of 15 litres did all three of us 2 showers. So 3 people, 2 showers each out of 15 litres of water. That was actually plenty. And that's including me washing long hair. One of the first things I did was got a window fitted into the sliding door. And that made a huge difference to the ability to see out of this side as a driver. Other things on the outside, very small detail here. That little rubber buffer. That surround there is usually a rubber seal, which this van didn't have any of. So that's a laser cut piece that's inserted on there and masticed on. These plastic trims on the inside, they basically just get pushed into little holes, and that's a leak point. Water can get down the back of there and it ends up dribbling to the inside. So I went round and masticed all of those up as well. So the van came with a roof rack. It's got a roll bar on the back, which is really handy for the canoe, and it's got these ladder support pieces on the side, which again are really handy for the canoe. So that lives up there most of the time. Now you'll notice we don't have a ladder on the back like many people do. Partly that's because I can't afford one yet, but at some point we might do. In the meantime, here's a trick. Let's open that right up. Tuck that out of the way. Getting up onto the roof is actually really easy even without a ladder. There's a built-in one in all these things. If you're tall enough. Put there, put there, and you're up. Simples. That is our van setup, which we used for 3 weeks last summer, and we use for occasional trips away as well. This isn't finished. It's functional but not complete, so these are some of my to-do list items which I'll be getting to over the next few months. At the moment we have one of these reflective covers that goes over the windscreen, and we've got some little pieces of chopped up bed sheet in here which hang up to create essentially makeshift curtains around the windows. So we need new curtains throughout, essentially. While we're talking about windows, we've got a window in the sliding door here, but we need a second window ideally, which I think is going to go in the side panel above the sink. So we will have 2 windows on that side. In practice, we can't put windows down this side very easily because any window here would be blocked off completely by the bunks. On the bunks, they actually function really well. There's only one small modification I'm thinking of for the bunks, and that is the bolts that hold the bunks in place when they're held up. They're just bolts at the moment, and I think a little like wing nut on the end just to make it quick and easy to take those out. That might be the only change I make to the bunks themselves. The double at the back, that all works perfectly well as it is. I think it would benefit from having fronts to the storage down there. In practice, nothing ever slides out of there, but some fronts to that just might make it a little bit nicer. Similarly, the kitchen unit, all the fronts are open at the moment. I'm considering whether to put fronts on these or not. In this space, probably, is where I intend to put a water tank. So that currently no water tank in here. So I want to fit a water tank in there. maybe 50 litres or so would be a good number for that. Doesn't need to be huge. In practice, 30 litres a week between the three of us is often enough. I also need to fit a diesel heater into here. So I've already fitted in a tank for the diesel heater that's sort of tucked in the way behind there, so the other side of the gas locker, and I need to fit a little diesel heater into the back here. Obviously it's well insulated already, so we don't need a lot of heat output from that. For the most part, just putting the kettle on gives us enough warmth into this space, but diesel heaters are just nice to have. I need to do something with the electrics. So at the moment the BMS doesn't allow charging, so I need to replace the BMS. I've also got I think it's a 100 amp automatic cut-off trip switch, which is faulty. So I need to replace that. So I've had to bypass that for the moment, but actually I've just disconnected the electrics for the time being until I can work on the various elements of that. The lighting, this strip light of LEDs is actually really good. They're very bright and they do a great job. They need fitting better, possibly with the ceiling having been painted as well, as it is just bare boards at the minute. We were in two minds when we fitted it as to whether we wanted it painted or wanted it bare. It looks nice bare, some of the other wood is bare inside the cabinets and such like, so it might remain bare, we'll see. Other lighting, I've got one spotlight here, I've got another one of these as well, so I've got a second one to mount, and the cabling for these needs to be fitted into behind panels rather than just duct tape to the surface. There's duct taping on, it works, but it's not very tidy. Down here I've got a piece of board that will fit against here to hide that, and a piece of carpet already cut to fit, so that'll make it all neat and tidy. So that needs fitting on. At the back I've got the bar that holds the rear doors open and stable, and I can hang a privacy screen on for the toilet and the shower. That needs improving on. I need to, instead of just a little camping bivvy tarp, I need to actually create a nice tarp that fits in place quick and easy, possibly with magnets, so that it fits into the space and does the job quickly and easily with less setup time. On the roof I need a solar panel, quite likely one of those flexible ones that I can fit onto the front of the roof above the screen. There's a decent amount of space there. I should be able to get 100 watts or so of solar panel on the front, and if there's then also space on the roof alongside the canoe, then that would be a good spot to put some extra solar as well. Outside the back I've got a tow bar fitted with electrics, but the cable is just wrapped around and tied off down there, so that needs actually wiring into the van so that I can use the tow bar, and that's going to be needed because when we go off on big trips like we did last summer, and we have the canoe on the roof and 3 bikes and us and all the other gear, on our way back through France last summer we were stopped at a police weight check station, and with the 3 of us and the bikes and all that other stuff, we came in at 3.4 tons out of the 3.5 that were allowed. So we need a trailer to put the bikes in and other heavy odds and ends, climbing gear maybe, those sorts of things, because if we tried to load up the bikes and all that stuff with us now, given that the boys are both significantly bigger than they were last summer, we would be over weight limit and therefore illegal and have all sorts of trouble. So we need a trailer on the back. So that's a this summer urgent thing before we can go off on a big trip again there. that was our Mercedes Sprinter campervan conversion as it is so far. Lots to do still, but functional as it is. If you have any comments, then there's a comment section down below. Ask any questions you like. I'll do my best to answer them. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe and maybe watch another one of the videos on my channel in one of these two places on the screen.